Good afternoon. I hope you have enjoyed your lunch as much as I have. Korea is definitely one of the best places in Asia to have good food. I'm very happy to be back here only a month after I was here for the first time with my good friends at Kim and Chang. And specifically happy today when we have such a knowledgeable audience in respect of the issues that we're discussing. Those of you who are as old as I am will remember possibly and may have seen the 1969 American film, If This Is Tuesday, This Must Be Belgium. It signifies the beginning of mass tourism and group travel, and it's this delightful story about an English tour guide leading around American tourists in Europe who obviously haven't been to Europe before and don't know where they are. Indonesia also suffers a bit from being a new kid on the block, and it's about 10 years ago that I told somebody from a faraway country that I lived in Indonesia. And I was told, oh yes, I know where that is. That's the capital of Bali, isn't it? Well, it isn't, of course. But before we talk about FTAs and trade, I'll give you some facts, and I realize that much of that is known here already in Korea, but I nevertheless think for those who don't know Indonesia very well, it's useful to know. Indonesia is the world's largest archipelago with a land area of almost 2 million square kilometers. It has more than 13,000 islands. That's the largest national economy in Southeast Asia, with a population of around 250 million inhabitants and a GDP per capita of $3,000. We have no foreign exchange control. Tax-wise, we tax dividends and other payments through a large series of double taxation treaties, usually reducing tax to anywhere between 10 and 20% on withholding tax. We have a corporate tax rate of about 25% on profits, 10% VAT on most goods and services. Politically, we've been quite stable for the last 10 years. We have parliament and president that are directly elected by the people. We're a secular state by constitution, but in some regions we continue to suffer from strife. There is a serious infrastructural backlog which we're trying to get over with, but it's not easy. And politically we're very stable. And if you want to put us geopolitically on the map, we're close to EU and US alignments. We're the third fastest growing economy in the entire G20. Despite the global financial and economic crisis, Indonesia gross domestic product is now worth over $700 billion US. And its strong growth has solidified its reputation as one of the world's most important emerging economies. Here you have a slide that shows our GDP growth over the last, 14 years. Starting in 1998, we had 95 billion, and we're now at 706.5 US billion. These are all figures of the central bank. The debt to GDP ratio is also significantly better, going down from 89 in 2000 down to 24% now in 2011. And just to compare that with a few other nations, the US debt to GDP ratio is 115%, and the EU debt to GDP ratio is 82%. Debt to GDP ratios are, of course, a measure of the financial leverage of any country and to what extent it is likely to be able to repay its debts. Foreign reserves show a significant growth too, from 34.7 billion US dollars in 2006 to 110 last year. We had some good news from the rating agencies last year and early this year. Moody's upgraded our global bond rating to BA1 from BA2, and we were cited to be the nation's economic resilience and improving public debt position. Just a month before that, Fitch did the same thing with our sovereign debt rating to BBB- from BB+. And that was approximately 14 years ago after we lost it. So we were very pleased, and the markets were pleased with that too, that happened. Exports and imports is what we're talking about today. The relevant figures here you see on the screen. Significant growth, $101 billion in 2006, now more than double that at 204. Imports show a comparable growth, and you can only see in the year 2008-2009, you see that dip, which was caused by the economic crisis in the Western Hemisphere and in Western Europe, which incidentally affected Indonesia much less than many other countries in the world. This is the economic projection of the World Bank, how it sees things going forward to the year 2015. You see that Indonesia is the best boy in the classroom, with 15% estimated growth, and it beats there Russia, India, and the other two BRIC countries, China and Brazil. It also beats the average of the ASEAN countries. However, we should realize that these are all moving targets. And indeed, if you read today's Asian Wall Street Journal, in a front page article, you see that they say that the emerging markets have boosted growth in recent years, but they are slowing down. Brazil last week, 2.7% growth in 2011, less than half of what was predicted last year. China, Monday, announced 7.5%, still very high, but it is significantly lower than previous estimates. In fact, it's the first time that China is below the 8% since 2005. South Africa, now 2.5%. Last year it was forecast to be 7.5%. So the figure for Indonesia that we're so proud of probably needs to be down-tuned too, as this is a global development. But they will remain still above the European figures, and the US and the Japan for some time to come. This is a slide which I always show when I know that Koreans are in the room, because Indonesia in some ways has looked a lot at Korea. It likes particularly the dedicated planning of its economy in particular business fields. For instance, and we've taken 3 industries that stand out: shipbuilding, semiconductors, and mobile phones. And we see a development taken over 3 decades, where in the beginning, the first decade, we see a strong government-led fundamental establishment, moving into the private sector in continuation and involvement with research and development. And shipbuilding, of course, we all know that Korea is #1 right now. Semiconductors, very much a similar development, government-led intensive development in the first decade, private initiative following in the second decade, and today #3 in the third decade. Mobile phones, more or less the same. I will now hand over to my colleague Harry, who will talk about the specific Indonesian import duty regulations. It's a bit of a dog show because I'll be coming back later on.
Thank you, Theo. I will explain to you a brief about the current developments with respect to customs and importation in Indonesia, the bad ones and also the good ones. Adopts a single ID for a single license for the importations of goods. But in 2010, they tried to split between import license for the manufacturer and import license for the trading companies. And that's why it creates problems. For manufacturing, they could not import finished products and directly sell without doing any manufacturing process. The issue is that most manufacturing companies also do tradings, meaning that they import finished products and directly sell to consumers. There are some reasons why there are certain reasons why the manufacturing companies would like to trade also. First one, because of there is possibility that they meet some surplus in demands that they could not meet by the quota by their manufacturing facilities, and for that remaining balance they can import and directly sell to consumers. And the second one, if they just want to introduce a new products, it is not beneficial for them to produce in their manufacturing plant and sell it. They will normally prefer to try the market by import and directly sell to the market. And if it shows that there will be a huge demand, then they can produce locally in their manufacturing plant. And because there are certain objections from the business, the government has in 2011 introduced a new regulation allowing the manufacturing companies to also import finished product and directly sell, provided that it is complementary to the products that they manufacture in the manufacturing plant. But subsequently, there is some objection also from the small medium enterprises who claim that they suffer losses because of the new regulation issued, and they claim to the Supreme Court for the nullification of the new regulations, which claim is accepted by the court. Theoretically, currently the regulation is still active, but within 3 months, the Minister of Trade must revoke that regulations, meaning that we back to the earlier stage where the manufacturing company cannot import and directly sell to the customer. Let me explain a bit about the licenses required briefly. It is a custom ID required for all importers. We call it the General Custom Identification Number. For importation of specific products, we need the Special Importer Identification Number. This is now the list of products required to be that can be imported using that specific license. The products can be changed time from time by enactment of new regulation by the minister. Also, we know there is registered importers. For importation of specific products, there must be licenses to be obtained. This is the list of the product. Again, the government can issue regulation to add or to reduce the list of the products. All products which listed here are can be imported after their pre-shipment inspection at the country of export. And for the importation purpose, the report of the surveyor must be attached to the import documents. There are also some restrictions on the import of horticulture products. Starting March 19th, 2012, importation of horticulture product can only be done through 4 ports in Indonesia. It's Tanjung Perak in Surabaya, Makassar, Medan, and Soekarno-Hatta Airport. There is no complaint filed so far, but the logical reasons for this that this restriction will result in costs for transportation of goods, because consumptions are largely made in the greater area of Jakarta. And if we see from the list, the import near Jakarta area can only be done at the Soekarno-Hatta Airport. There is no seaport near Jakarta which can be used for importation for horticulture products. This is the good one, import of used capital goods. In general, importation of used capital goods can only be done with the report of surveyor saying that the goods are in a good condition for to be used by the importers. It is not scrap. And government just issued the regulations allowing the simplifications of the importation of used capital goods for certain products. This is the products shown on the screen are products that require not a surveyor report, but only recommendation for certain official from the government. The reason it is for the government to issue is because of certain requests from the business for simplification of process. For example, the one that listed item C, that the industrial locations, because there is a request from certain manufacturer in Thailand who suffered losses because of flood, who intend to relocate his factory to Indonesia and make some requests for an exemption, because it is not beneficial for them to have surveyors to do survey on the whole factory, equipments in their factory, and the request is granted, and they can simply submit application to get recommendation for the relocation of their equipment to Indonesia. This is the enactment of new tariff code, the SS code in Indonesia. Just applies in January 2012. Certain issues arise because there is a lack of socializations to importers. Certain importers still use the old one enacted in 2007, so which result in the rejections of importation documents for the purpose of importations. And for this purpose, they need to rectify and includes the new SS code applies in the 2012. The 2012 SS code is issued with the main aims to there are some change in editorial, changes in the notes, additions of new tariff systems, items, elimination of the tariff items, incorporations of new tariff items, and also clarifications of the tariff items, which is not clear in the 2007 code. This is like I said before, that the many importers still use the old custom books in the 2007 for the purpose of importation that will need to be rectified. Also because of the government just issued the regulation in the December 2011 and applies in the 2012 without any late time for the importer to get adopted with the new regulations. And for the next slide, we'll give it to Mike.
Okay, let's hope that technology doesn't let us down any further. A few words on the ASEAN-Korea Free Trade Agreement. The ASEAN-Korean Free Trade Agreement had a couple of targets. It was set out to be eliminating or reducing trade of goods barriers, both tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. It was supposed to be improving services, market access, improving investment rules and regulations, and generally improving the economic relations amongst the ASEAN-Korea Free Trade Association parties in order to enhance ASEAN and Korean welfare. Here's a bit of a history. I won't have to go through this entirely, but it started out in 1989 with the Sectoral Dialogue Forum, and eventually in 2005 there was the signing of the Framework Agreement on Comprehensive Economic Cooperation amongst the governments of ASEAN and Korea. And since then there has been a steady flow of implementations and further regulations, and finally in 2010 the joint declaration on ASEAN-Korea Strategic Partnership for Peace and Prosperity was adopted. The purposes are to strengthen and improve economic, trade and investment cooperation among the member countries, to progressively liberate and improve good and service trade, to discover new cooperation areas and to develop the right policies with respect to economic cooperation between the member countries, to facilitate a more effective economic integration from the new members, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, also to bridge economic development gap among the member countries, and finally, to accelerate goods and capital flows. The ASEAN-Korean Free Trade Agreement cooperation carries out international trade principles very much based on the World Trade Organization principles. These are the regulations that were actually issued to implement the ASEAN-Korea Free Trade Association in Indonesia. There are not many, but what we hear from the market is that the regulations are being implemented in a fair and quick manner, and whereas there used to be a lot of complaints from businessmen about the function of the customs and the Department of Trade, as far as the ASEAN-Korean Free Trade Agreement issues, there appears to be a relative positive treatment of those who invoke it. Here you see the positive impact that it's had on trade. The ASEAN-Korea trade is increasing significantly. In 2004, the trade was totally 46.4 billion and has expanded to almost double that amount in 2010. It's reported that in May 2011, the trade has reached 106 billion, and we foresee that it's going to be 150 billion by 2015 if all the circumstances remain the same. Here a comparison of the trade balances that Indonesia holds with China, Korea and Japan. I won't, in the interest of time, I will not further comment on these figures, but they are impressive by any sort of standard. How do you eliminate or reduce the tariff trades? Indonesia's tariff reduction and elimination schedule is as follows. Out of the 8,737 tariff lines, 7,875 products, or 90%, are listed under the normal track, while sensitive products consist of 5.8%, or 506 products of the total number of tariff lines. Indonesia uses only groups A, B, and E, and I'll show you later on what they are, for highly sensitive products. Industry-wise, processed primary industry is one of the most protected industries in the ASEAN-Korea Free Trade Association. It includes 58 exempted products, consisting of 65.9% of Group E products. Metal industry is another highly protected industry which categorizes 229 products under Group B of highly sensitive products. Transport equipment lists 34.9% of its tariff lines under the sensitive track, either as sensitive or Group B products. And this slide shows you what happens in the regular track, regular or the normal track. Products in the normal track are those whose import or duty recommendation elimination is accelerated to increase ASEAN-Korea trade volume. You see the basis year is 2006, when the regular track import duties were 20, 15, 10, 5 or 0 respectively, and they had to be brought back over the years 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, culminating in 0 for all regular track lines. Indonesia, however, received 2 years flexibility to eliminate tariff rates by no later than January of this year. Here you see the groups that I referred to earlier, the sensitive track groups. Products in the sensitive track are those that are considered sensitive because of the industry in which they are manufactured. and their import duty will be reduced more gradually than the rates that are in the regular track. And you see them here, Group A through E. I'm not going to read them out all one by one. Suffice it to know that Indonesia's sensitive track products belongs only to Group A, Group B, and Group E. How do you go about obtaining the tariff preference application? Goods imported into the territory of a party will be deemed to be originating and eligible for preferential tariff treatment if they are either wholly obtained or produced entirely in the territory of the exporting party, or if not wholly obtained or produced in the territory of the exporting party, but they are eligible under the provisions of the Trade of Goods Agreement. And ASEAN and Korea have agreed to use the general rule to regulate the rules of origin of goods that by applying regional value content not less than 40% of FOB, or change of tariff heading, CTH, also apply the product special rules, PSR, for products which general rule cannot be applied. The goods, however, must be transported point to point directly between the territories of the exporting party and the importing party. The tariff preference under the rule that has been adopted in 2008 only prevails when the four requirements are met. It's only for import of goods that is completed with a certificate of origin, what we call Form AK. When the import duty is higher or equal than the most favored nation tariff, then the certificate of origin is not required. Thirdly, the importer must state the preferential tariff facility code and the certificate of origin reference number to the customs authority of the importing party. And finally, the original page of the certificate of origin, again Form AK, must be submitted by the importer to the customs authority of the importing party. The certificate of origin slide I'm going to skip in view of the interest of time. Documents presentation I will also leave undiscussed. And that, apologies, when we reloaded the presentation after the initial problems, the wrong presentation was loaded. So we'll now go back to the original one. Okay, Indonesian government has been modernizing its customs administration over the last 2 years. What has specifically happened is a number of measures that resulted in the following. The time for customs clearance has been significantly reduced, and that's also what we hear out of the market, out of our clients. The procedures for the restitution of duties for re-exported imports have been much simplified and are made much faster, those restitutions. There is now a procedure for an online certificate of origin facility, and in particular what ASEAN-Korean Free Trade Agreement introduced, the national window, has now been incorporated into the Indonesian national window, has now been incorporated in the ASEAN single window. And there has always also been the acceleration of the Asian Economic Community, AEC, through the AEC blueprint and through the ASEAN Customs Visions. And that is a future program of how customs in ASEAN should cooperate with each other from 2002 to 2015. Another development is that there is more and more talk about an Indonesia-Korea comprehensive economic partnership agreement, as it already exists with India and with Korea and India and Korea and some other countries. Now the Korean and the Indonesian government have mandated a joint study group to conduct a feasibility study. And that joint study group has estimated a possible effect using the computable general equilibrium study method That shows that Indonesia's welfare would grow to $10.6 billion and its GDP would grow by 4.3% if a comprehensive SEPA would be introduced. On the Korean side, the welfare would increase by $1.5 billion and GDP growth only by approximately 1.3%. You should see this against the background of quite differing economies. The differences between the two countries are significant. Indonesia's manufacturing industry dominates GDP by 47%. In Korea it's different. The service industry here contributes the larger part of its GDP. And finally, in terms of income per capita, of course, given the large population numbers, there is a huge difference. Korea approximately $20,000 and Indonesia approximately $3,000. Now, what would be the areas that could be incorporated into a comprehensive economic partnership agreement? It should first be realized that the effect of an FTA is larger for countries with a bigger integrated market and a more active foreign direct investment regime. And for the Korea-Indonesia free trade agreement to be comprehensive, we should enhance the market access by eliminating tariffs again and addressing non-tariff measures, improving investment environment, broaden investment relations, and develop strategic cooperative partnerships. Of course, all subjects that are much easier to be incorporated in a comprehensive economic partnership agreement than in a straightforward FTA. And the negotiations on the formal agreement are expected to begin later this year. What are the three pillars that should be focus of the SEPA? First of all, the market access, then the facilitation of trade and investment, and the economic cooperation, including capacity building. What does that mean? For the trade in goods, it means consider a review of the sensitive track exemptions and relaxations from the required reductions. For the trade in services, it means service suppliers in both countries should enjoy preferential treatment in the various sectors, such as preferential shareholding, relaxation of negative list restrictions, such as Indonesia in fact already does. We have a negative list policy in which certain areas of investment are restricted or indeed prohibited, but investments from ASEAN countries are exempted from those restrictions. In the field of investment, what could the Indonesia-Korea SEPA do? Well, let's go back to how the current status is. The majority of Korean investments in Indonesia are in manufacturing, in mining, and in the service sectors. It is the 7th largest investor in Indonesia. And if you look at the manner in which these investors are satisfied with their investment climate, they are most troubled by an increase in logistic costs and delays resulting from underdeveloped infrastructure. Anyone who's been to Indonesia will realize that the manner in which the infrastructure of roads and ports and railroads has developed falls behind that in many of the neighboring countries. And foreign investment in infrastructure should be encouraged to the maximum extent, and of course Korean investors who are already savvy in these fields could play a significant role. For energy and infrastructure, you come to the same conclusions. The solution is that incentives for foreign direct investment so that customized sector region matches can be achieved. A few further areas of focus for the SEPA: the elimination of non-tariff measures, including the TBT, the technical barriers to trade, and the sanitary phytosanitary measures. It could include provisions on the trade remedy measures, including anti-dumping, countervailing duties and safeguard measures. We feel that the government procurement side of trade could be much enhanced if there is capacity building elements into it. It means also that the restrictive rules that there are now should be liberalized, they should be more transparent, there should be due process, non-discrimination and anti-corruption. I know it's a lot to ask in one sentence, but that is essentially what government procurement should achieve, and these things are good subjects for a CEPA. Indonesia has made good progress with beefing up its intellectual property rights, but still enforcement is a big issue, and that is something principally for the courts, but nevertheless the enforcement provisions in the relevant laws could be enhanced. And finally, customs procedures and trade facilitation, their harmonization and simplification is required through the laws, and transparency and an advanced ruling system. This is what we had to say about the Indonesian situation. I'm sorry that there were some technical problems, but if you have questions, we'd like you to do those after the next presentation, which is on India. And you don't need to restrict your questions strictly on trade or free trade or CEPAs. We're a general full-service law firm, and if you have any other questions on the investment laws and rules of Indonesia, please feel free to contact us. Thank you very much.